So if you've driven through UT's campus at all recently, you might have noticed you are not the only one on wheels. Perhaps you have seen the food delivery robots driving around, looking all cute, as some people say. And genuinely, I have to say, my wife feels bad for these little guys sometimes. Feels like they are, being forced into labor, but they are doing a good deed. They are bringing food to you. That is, if you are a UT student. But if you're in downtown Knoxville, you might be wondering, why is this not something that's available here? And long story, short answer is, it's something that the city is considering, similar to how they were considering the scooters, the electric scooters and electric bikes back in the day that are now a permanent part of Knoxville. The city is looking at a pilot program, perhaps, to see whether or not this technology is something that could work in Knoxville beyond just the University of Tennessee campus. But before we get started in this discussion about how food robots could work in downtown Knoxville, the pros and the cons and things to consider, we should introduce ourselves. I am Ryan Wilusz, downtown reporter at KnoxNews, joined here for the first time on the Scruffy Stuff by
Daniel Dassow, and I am the high-tech growth reporter at KnoxNews, covering energy and tech and growth and development.
So you graduated from the University of Tennessee in May, correct?
I did.
And what was your experience, I guess, just to start out, with food delivery robots on campus?
Well, the food delivery robots were introduced in March of 2022, so that was spring of my junior year. They were quite a novelty, of course. No one was used to seeing these little autonomous, self-driven robots bringing their Starbucks or Moe's or Chipotle directly to their dorm or their academic building. The robots were very endearing. I think one reason college campuses love them, they're now at dozens of college campuses across the U.S., is that the company Starship Technologies has made these robots easily programmable to suit the specific needs of your campus. So, for instance, these robots will play Rocky Top for you when the lid opens and you grab your food. Other campuses, of course, will use whatever their song is.
Does it do it in like robot beeping sounds, or is it like play an actual song?
It plays a sort of instrumental version, kind of similar. If anyone listening got accepted to UT, they send you a little card, and when you open it, it plays Rocky Top. It's the same kind of deal. And on the side, they have a sticker that says, "Hungry, I deliver to Vols." The other thing is that these robots are programmed with GPS technology, so that's how they know where they're going. It's similar to the GPS technology you use on your phone. They know all of the roads that they are allowed to travel on, and that's actually a key part of the pause that the city is placing on the robots. These food delivery robots at UT currently do not operate on city-owned streets. They only operate on state-owned land on campus. So their operating map does not include any city streets yet. And what the city wants to do is just make sure before these are deployed across Knoxville, the city wants to make sure that they're not going to cause pedestrian issues, that they won't be a risk for car accidents. One thing that's endearing about these robots, I think something that makes them seem more human-like, is that they will wait at crosswalks, and they have several cameras that will tell them if it's safe for them to go across the street. So if you are driving through campus, you'll see them sort of waiting with students to cross the road. And they are pretty safe. They haven't caused any car accidents at UT, but I think the city just wants to make sure before it opens up Knoxville to all these companies that the robots aren't going to cause any issues.
So a pilot program approach, which is something that the city is considering, makes sense to do exactly that, just to test things out and make sure that everything is good to go. And, we realized whenever the scooter pilot program rolled out that maybe all the, kinks weren't ironed out originally to start. I remember I did a story about how the GPS technology was supposed to keep the scooters from going through Market Square, and then I easily rode a scooter through Market Square. And so, but that's why you do it, right, is you want to test it and make sure things are working. The big question I have is, do we need them at all in downtown Knoxville? Because, and that's not the point of the pilot program necessarily. It's, to be able to say whether or not this is something we want in our city. But is it something that we need in our city? I'm not sure I'm sure that'll be part of the conversation. I'm just wondering, first of all, like UT campus, you mentioned like the state property. It's a lot more wide open, I feel like, than downtown Knoxville. I mean, we've talked about here on the podcast before, just like how we talked about it as recently as 2 weeks ago when we were talking about the open streets concept in downtown Knoxville, how it's just nice to be able to breathe a little bit walking downtown because the sidewalks are so narrow on Gay Street with the patios jutting out onto the sidewalk a little bit. So I would be interested to see if this is something that could actually operate smoothly downtown. I think they would have to go down Gay Street, maybe not. But then there's also, other side roads and whatnot that I've heard about that, when they tried to bring the trolley pub to downtown Knoxville, the trolley pubs, which were powered by people pedaling, could not handle downtown Knoxville hills. Maybe that just says something about our about our fitness level, that we can't go up a hill, but maybe the robot can. I don't know, but these are things that I'm sure that the city will be looking at. Can it handle the roads in Knoxville? Are the sidewalks wide enough in Knoxville? I'll just be very interested to see these things in a more dense area with more people out and about, especially, on campus. I feel like you have a lot of people who are familiar with the robots because it's part of their everyday life. And you have a lot more people in downtown Knoxville that maybe are out-of-towners that are just visiting town and see these things and maybe won't know how to interact with them the way college students do. Although we did talk about some college students have gotten in trouble with these robots before as well.
Right. It was back in late April. It was about 2 months after they had deployed these robots, and the news broke that these two guys at UT had basically assaulted one of these robots, picked it up and slammed it into the ground. And one thing I think is helpful to know, it's a safety mechanism on these robots. If you pick them up, if they can sense that they have been lifted off the ground for any amount of time, they let out quite an unpleasant screeching noise. It's kind of like a very high-pitched fire alarm. And so you're not supposed to be able to pick them up very easily. They're kind of awkward and cumbersome. They're actually fairly large. I mean, they don't look very big when you're not standing right next to one, but if you're trying to pick one up, which you should never do, they can be pretty, awkward and boxy. And you mentioned, downtown is different from campus in a lot of ways, and so the city isn't just looking to UT as a sort of pilot. If that were the case, then they might have already deployed these robots downtown. I spoke with a city official who said the program has been very successful at UT, and it actually gave the city the idea that maybe these could work downtown. But there are some pretty key differences between campus and downtown. You had mentioned, the density of restaurants downtown along Gay Street and Market Square and in Old City. It's not hard to walk and walk past several restaurants just in the space of maybe half a mile. Whereas on campus, you could be at your dorm and be quite a ways away from the student union or a restaurant on the other side of campus that you want in that moment. And so there's a convenience there that maybe we don't need for downtown because downtown is walkable. And, the student population at UT, their schedules are full. They're going between classes. They might not always have time to walk and get food. There's also the question here about people who work in food delivery, people who work for, DoorDash or Uber Eats, and how the food robots might affect their jobs downtown. That's also a question I think the city's going to be taking seriously is, do we need these robots in the first place? And secondly, what effect might these robots have on the local delivery labor market?
I think even beyond the local delivery people, like the people that are actually just in the restaurants. I mean, if you work in a downtown environment, it's more of a fast-paced environment. And then you're also having to deal with, but you have, to-go orders, and then you have, DoorDash orders, and now you're going to throw robot orders into it as well. I mean, that's another thing on just the restaurant end to have to think about. And it obviously would be something that you would have to opt into. It's not like, the robots are downtown, so every restaurant has to provide, services to put the food into the robots. I mean, it's something that would be optional. The other thing I think about is just the difference between, college campus and downtown in terms of just the respect that you might have for something, like a food delivery robot on your campus. I think one cool thing about, being on UT campus is it's, a college institution. It's a place of innovation and technology. And you see these robots around, and it's part of campus life. And like the same people see them every day. I talked about it a second before, but like, you mentioned downtown being so condensed. Like it's easy to walk from one restaurant on one side of town to the other. Maybe where somebody who's downtown would want to use one of these robots is maybe there's something in Happy Hollow or the Central Broadway area that they would want to eat that maybe they don't want to walk to. I just cannot imagine a robot just kind of going up Broadway and just like not coming across somebody who has no idea what this is and is interested in it. Like that's just not up to date with this technology that is so present on UT's campus that everybody knows about it. I feel like it would just be hard to like educate the masses about what these things are.
I think that's something that these robots offer to campuses as well, is the chance to look cutting edge, to look like, oh, look at us, we're deploying the latest technology, we have food robots. That definitely was the feeling I got when UT deployed them. The administrators seemed proud that they had brought this technology to campus, let alone the fact that sometimes these robots don't work super well. They get stuck, they can't navigate every kind of terrain. They can go up small curbs. They have issues with large curbs. It was not uncommon when I was a student at UT to see a robot that was stuck on its side or floundering or, needed help. And I think that's something that made them cute to people, is that they weren't this invincible technology like you would see in a scary movie about robots. They had these strange human vulnerabilities. They had terrains they couldn't navigate. Sometimes they needed your help. And the navigability issue is big too. I think the city realizes that things could go wrong with this. Imagine a year from now you are walking down Gay Street on a Saturday night. It's super busy, but also 3 people have ordered from food delivery robots and they're trying to navigate the same sidewalks you are. They can't move if people are walking all around them. They have sensors that keep them from moving if they don't see a clear path forward. So I can imagine a future when you have these robots essentially getting stuck on busy streets, getting stuck in the way of pedestrians, hopefully not getting stuck in the way of vehicles, but that could happen as well. And those are all things the city's going to be paying close attention to. As with the scooters, back a few years ago, when we saw how those scooters had not gone well in some cities, most notably for us in Knoxville, we had seen debacles happen in Nashville with those scooters when they were deployed without a pilot program in place. That's happened in some cities with these food delivery robots. Cities like Pittsburgh and Chicago are developing or have developed pilot programs, and that could be the path that Knoxville goes down, is a pilot program to deploy some of them and see how it goes. Or it could be like cities like San Francisco and Toronto that have restricted the amount of food delivery robots, or the amount of companies have restricted where they can go, or in the case of Toronto have actually outright banned them over concerns for pedestrian safety.
Yeah, I guess my big question is, like, at the end of the day, who would these really benefit in downtown Knoxville? Because it's not the delivery drivers. Maybe it's the restaurants. I mean, to be able to have one more way to get their food to people. But again, we talk about downtown being so dense. Like, I don't really necessarily think that people who live downtown would get that much more of a benefit out of them. By the time that you walk down to your apartment, walk across the street, to another restaurant, go in there and order, it's about the same amount of time. I mean, I get that downtown life is a fast-paced life for some, and maybe you need that food really quick, but man, it's still downtown is a small town in a big city. It feels like where you don't. It's not a struggle to get food at any point. So I'll be very interested in it. We talked about the sort of the look on campus of being sort of a tech-forward campus by deploying these robots. I mean, the same could be applied to downtown Knoxville. Whether or not downtown Knoxville wants to be a cutting-edge city, like a campus might want to be the cutting-edge campus by having these food robots deployed. What are your thoughts on that, Daniel? I mean, we think about, would the robots be a good look for downtown Knoxville? If you were out of towner and you came into Knoxville and you saw food delivery robots, would you be like, oh, wow, this city has got it going on. They're up to date with the latest tech.
Yeah, the question to me seems to be, is the novelty of these robots worth things that could go wrong with them? Because ultimately what they offer is that moment where you say, oh, that's so cool if a robot is delivering my food. But if it gets to you late, if it leaves before you can get there, is it worth having people come from out of town maybe and say, oh, it looks good on Knoxville that they have these robots? And I'm not actually sure it would be a great look for Knoxville. I don't think when people are looking for a great downtown, that this is the kind of technology they're really looking for. Streets in downtown Knoxville, are already sometimes difficult to navigate. So I wouldn't be completely surprised if the city decided either not to go forward with a pilot program, or they did go forward with a pilot program and ultimately decided to either restrict the use of the robots or otherwise not fully deploy them. We are somewhat of a tech hub, but I think we're not a tech hub in the same way that San Francisco is. San Francisco is one of the earliest cities to deploy this technology, and they're also a city that moved pretty swiftly to restrict these robots. If it didn't go well in a city like San Francisco, which already has a lot going for it as a hub of technology, although, of course, we're hearing more and more in the news about San Francisco's decline after the pandemic cleared office spaces there. I don't think that these delivery robots are the kind of technology that can change a city's reputation or even move the city's reputation a degree one way or another. And I don't see Knoxville trying to, designate itself as a national tech hub in that sense. We are obviously close to world-class research facilities at UT and at Oak Ridge National Laboratory in particular. And we have companies like TVA headquartered here that make us a name in the world of technology and innovation. I'm just not sure that these food delivery robots are going to change the city's reputation for the better necessarily.
Yeah, and then just to think about it on a more dumbed down level too. Does it match the vibe or for lack of a better word, of what downtown Knoxville is? I mean, you think about, we're a city that has a lot of historical buildings that have been repurposed, and we're still kind of, southern and slightly under the radar still. We're a river town. We're outdoorsy. Just something about the robots coming through downtown just doesn't really feel like it meshes well. And then you talk about the scooters too. I think people had that thought and sort of similar thought about when the scooters came into Knoxville, and I think they weren't embraced right away. They've been a little bit more welcome now that there's been a little bit more education about where they can and can't be driven. But those scooters worked well in Knoxville on a couple different levels. One, it helped with the encouraging of less vehicle traffic and getting alternative forms of transportation. Two, outdoors, you're getting to experience the city in a new way. It was like a direct benefit to the person who was using it. You were an active user of this technology, where the robots thing is a little bit different. The individual who is benefiting from the robot is not actually using the technology themselves. And I think that is a little bit of a difference between these two things too. Like the novelty I could see wearing off, where it's not something that you are personally using.
Yeah, it's like the scooters clearly help you to get from point A to point B faster. They also have the novelty factor. A lot of people haven't ridden them before, so if it's their first time, there's the excitement of using technology they haven't used before. And that might be true for people the first few times they use these food delivery robots. But when I was a student at UT, I never used one. I was with people, for instance, in the student newsroom there, who did use them. And they would say oh, my food delivery robot keeps getting delayed. Oh, it's not getting here. It's taking too long to bring my food from point A to point B. That could have been for any number of reasons. The food could have been delayed. When these robots go to a place to pick up food, they wait outside. The restaurant gets an alert that a food